Welcome to Conversations for Our Time, podcast number 17 with the Quiet Sun team, George and John. It's times like now that we probably should be thinking about more about self-sufficiency more than ever, and to take control of our own food and water supply. And we've been talking about many subjects on our podcast, such as taking responsibility, bushcrafting, prepping, how important the soil food web is, and anything up to natural living, because we feel that nature is pushing us to relearn how to take care of ourselves properly, and not look for anything that is outsourced. Well, in an ideal world, even if we had the time, the money, the space, it's not easy to become fully self-sufficient in these times. We are aware of that, but to perhaps rely on the current system whilst creating a new system. And there is still so much we can do in the meantime to prep ourselves for community living or off-grid living. We just do what we can now to help us move in the right direction. And we feel these podcasts would help people who are not self-sufficient yet, or even help those who are self-sufficient already, who do have the time, the space, and the money to do this. And we'd like to think that we can help anyone who is in between as well. What I'm saying is that these podcasts are for those on any level. You don't have to take everything that we say on board. Even if you just took one thing or want to learn more about connecting to nature spiritually, or knowing where to buy organic heirloom seeds, or to learn how to make the best compost. We feel we are offering wide variety of information and knowledge for people, so they have somewhere to go to or something to go on. So this podcast will be part 7 of the mini series Regenerative Permaculture. So how you doing, John?
Yeah, good, George. Thanks. Yeah, it's a interesting time, man. Lots going on, lots energetically, and I think I was listening to one of Dave Debine's podcasts earlier. I haven't listened to him for ages, but he was just talking about this energetic change that's kind of going on at the moment.
Yeah,
and I think it's that I've kind of been studying the micro to the macrocosm for a while now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I was actually studying DNA the other day. And yeah, anyway, so Dave Devine was talking about how the 4 gas giants that are in our solar system in October 2024, they're going to be in this kind of alignment, which they haven't been in since 79 AD. And this along with, so we're going to be between the sun and these 4 gas giants, right? So can you imagine the energetic levels that are going to be created by that configuration? So the reason I'm saying
the energies will be heavy.
They'll be heavy, but I think there's this also, along with our magnetosphere, our waning magnetosphere, it is going to bring, maybe, and I think a lot of what's going on at the moment, people kind of losing their minds and all the other stuff, is there's this energetic force that exists in our universe that we cannot see, and we still have no real comprehension of it. I mean, the ancients certainly did, right? So I'm just mentioning this because I think it's really important to remember that even though things seem dire, it's there's a lot of light out there, and there's so many things that we can't see that exist that have an influence over us. A lot of our evolution now is actually to do with whether we're open to this change, and do we want to hold on to this old world? Because I certainly still have these attachments to the old world, right? But I'm ready to embrace this change. And I think there's many people that kind of fear change, and it can be scary, right? I mean, we've all been through this experience where we don't want to let go of things that we felt kept us safe, or, you know, just secure from these outside influences that seem scary. But we are these beautiful light beings. And Diamond was actually talking about these connections between the filaments, these Birkeland currents that exist that are connecting stars and connecting solar systems and galaxies. And these are observable. And the filaments that exist within our DNA strands, and how Kundalini Yoga explains this kind of intertwining energy that exists through our body, you know? So I'm explaining this because whatever we see in the microcosm is happening in the macrocosm, and vice versa, which means it's also happening with us. And as the Earth's magnetic field is changing, so are ours, right? And the other thing I was thinking is, like, we see the northern lights and the southern lights, the aurora borealis, you know, and in times of old, when the magnetosphere changes, these become far more visual, and we see other light phenomena in the sky. And I think the same thing is happening within us. So I think it's really important to kind of remember that, you know, we interpret our world through our conditioning and our experience, but there's far more to experience, and we can become far more evolved as spiritual beings. So I wanted to kind of set that as a tone, because even in the soil, we have this electrical energy pulsing through the soil. So everything is connected by these electrical currents, but we can't see them, you know, but they exist. And you think of all the people that came around in the 18th century that were talking about electric in the sky, the ether, the ground. Yeah. So yeah, it's just really important to kind of see this as a unfolding of the cosmos, and we can either resist it or we can embrace it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I mean, a major energetic shift happening, and has been happening for a long time. And I think there's lots of things happening simultaneously. And just going back to where you said, it will make people sort of lose their minds in such a way that it will cause them such anxiety and stress. But these are the times that we are being forced to shift, to go with that flow and go with that shift, because, to put it bluntly, we as a society have had it far, far too easily, right? And now, you know, as I was saying before, nature is pushing us to be self-sufficient, to go with the times, go with the changes that are happening with the earth. And all of that's happening is happening within us. So we can either keep looking on the outside and to try and find that security, or we go inwards. And this is what you and I have been doing, but doing it on different ways, because there's no right or wrong way to go within. As long as you do go in, and your subconscious, your spirit will do what it needs to do to heal. And, you know, yes, the whole point is also to grow food and look for something outside of you as such to to learn and to flow with all the changes, but to learn everything about the soil. Everything is electricity, and we need to know that. We need to understand that because of all the cycles, we will go through these changes as well, and we need to do it. We need to learn how to do all of these things. That ancients knew all of this already, and that information got lost. That information got taken away, but we are here to relearn this kind of stuff. So I think, yes, I think that's a great tone to begin with, but we can really make it easier on ourselves. We can make it easier on ourselves by learning nature, learning how she works, allowing those lessons to come with us and go with the current, and go with the rhythm of nature and the rhythm of change. So last week, John, we were talking about making your own lab and EM. We were talking about the different compost types, mouldering and static. We were talking about Johnson Su bioreactor, vermicomposting, windrows on a large scale, bokashi, and the wonderful hugelkulters. We've given a lot of information with regards to that. So what I wanted to say is, now that we've given that information out to people, we can really think about what, people can then think about what they can do depending on their situation, what materials that they have and what they can get, what climate that they have and what they live in, and really thinking about what they can work with. It's not about overwhelming anyone as such, but just giving people options on what they can do. And what I wanted to mention also here is, I know you do talk about it in your webinars, John. We're going to go into more of the soil. How are we able to access the nutrients already available in the soil, and what can we do about the deficiency of the nutrients in that soil? Because what we need to look at is why plants suffer, and this is heavily connected, as we know, to the industrial agriculture and what they do to the soil. And we want to look at what is the soil lacking and what nutrients are soluble in the soil, and how are nutrients not available.
Okay, yeah, cool, man. So we can kind of break down that into parts. So if we just talk about what are the essential plant nutrients first, so people understand what are macro and what are micro. So I'm just going to kind of read these off just so people understand, or
just the basics.
So the macronutrients are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Nitrogen comes in two forms. It comes in nitrate and ammonium. Then we got phosphorus. It also comes in like phosphate. Then potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium. So they're macronutrients. They're nutrients that the plant needs most of. Okay?
Yes.
And they will have different effects and different functions for the plant or the soil biome. And then the micronutrients are iron, manganese, zinc, copper, chlorine, boron, nickel, molybdenum, silicon, selenium, and cobalt. So they're the micronutrients. You do have other trace nutrients as well, but they're kind of not really that important for this discussion.
Yeah.
So they are the nutrients that you will find in most soils. Now, they'll be there, but what quantities there are in there and how they're accessed is another matter. So we do suffer from deficiencies in certain, I will kind of go through. So magnesium and calcium certainly are things that tend to be devoid from a lot of agricultural soils. Calcium is probably the fourth most abundant. So you'll have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Then calcium is the fourth one of what plants will most need. Now, calcium can be bound up by lots of different things, and it works in a way which is adsorption. So it's different than absorption. It's adsorption. Adsorption means that when a chemical, well, say in this case, calcium, the calcium molecule will connect itself to the outside of something. In the case of soil, it's the soil aggregates that hold these adsorbed nutrients on the outside of the soil particle.
Yeah.
So that's just an example. I'll go through the different groups that minerals fall into in regards to how they're accessed. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
We have highly mobile, or known as soluble, and that they are nitrate, sulfur, boron, and chlorine. So the nitrate and the sulfur are the macronutrients. So they're highly soluble. What that basically means is that they're easily accessed by plants. So that's a bonus, which means at most pHs, or a higher range of pHs, these nutrients are available to the plant to be absorbed into the plant root. Yeah. Now, in the case of these four, they also, because they're highly mobile, if you have leaching in your soil, these are easily leached from the soil. So nitrogen or nitrate can easily be leached from the soil, so can sulfur. But those two you find in quite high amounts. Yeah. But because that's why they were called a macronutrient. The micronutrients, boron and chlorine, because they're in quite small amounts compared to the nitrate and the sulfur, if you have leaching, those things will then become deficient from the soil because they're less available. There's less of that nutrient available. So you can kind of see that there's a pro to that and there's a con to that, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So the less mobile or adsorbed, this is where we were talking about calcium. These are minerals that are available in the soil, but they need something to release them from the soil particle. Yeah. So these are ammonium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, molybdenum, and nickel. They're all needed by plants in different amounts for different reasons. But the essential point is what we actually need to release this is we actually need biology. Okay. So these nutrients can be solubilized by biological, chemical, or physical processes. So they can be released by other chemicals or a chemical reaction. They can be released by biology, so the soil food web can release these nutrients. Mycorrhizal fungi can release these nutrients. Or a physical process, so the pH dropping, for instance, that is a physical process, so that can release certain nutrients. So certain things like aluminium or zinc, when you get to a lower pH, these become more available to the plant. Yeah, so that means that they are more available at lower pHs.
Okay, got you. Yeah.
Okay. So then we have the immobile, and these are chemically bonded. So phosphorus, copper, iron, manganese, and zinc are immobile. Yeah. So these
Yeah.
are chemically bonded to the soil particles. So I'll give you an example. We can actually increase phosphorus uptake into plants by using mycorrhizal fungi or arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. So, and things like rhizobacteria can fix nitrogen for plants to form things like proteins. And another example would be acidic and nitrogen rich rains initiate chemical reactions of all sorts within the soil. So this is what I'm talking about, this chemically bonded stuff. This chemical process can then release these particular minerals
Yeah.
from that chemically bonded state. So there's lots of ways that there's been this kind of discussion going on between soil experts for maybe a decade about, is there all the nutrients that a plant needs in all soil? So this goes on to the question or the part that you were talking about chemical agriculture. When we use chemical fertilizers on soils, we kind of don't really know what effect it's going to have. So these have definitely had an effect on the nutrients that were available in agricultural soils. So maybe 100 years ago, most of the nutrients would have been available.
I think so too. Yeah.
As soon as we start putting chemical fertilizer on there, we cause all sorts of problems. So we cause acidification of soils, we cause leaching, we cause things to be bound up. So you can add particular elements to the soil which bind up other elements. So there's all that to consider essentially. But really, so I'll give you an example, an historic example is the Roman Empire salted all their soils and they ruined their agricultural soils. If you add too much calcium to soil, certain soil like clay, you can turn it into concrete, which would basically mean that you can then not plant in it because plant roots can't penetrate
Of course.
concrete, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we need to be aware of all of that. The other thing I want to mention as well is like when we're applying nutrients to the soil, especially if it's done in an artificial way through artificial fertilizers, by increasing a particular nutrient or chemical, we actually inhibit other chemicals. So certain chemicals will either increase or decrease the availability of other chemicals in the soil. And when I'm talking about chemical, I'm talking about the nutrients, the nutrients and the elements available in the soil. Chemical is just a generic term.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what's really important to consider. That really what we need to be doing when we're going to address any potential issue in soil is we need to test the soil to see what is available and what's not available. So you can test the soil directly through to test what is soluble, but it won't always tell you what's not soluble. So we can do other tests. So these are like standard soil tests. There's other tests that like where they use particular things to extract other elements from the soil. or you can use a thing called plant sap analysis, and plant sap analysis will actually tell you what the plant is uptaking, because the plant will give you an indication of the soluble and the absorbed and the chemically bonded. Yeah, because if a plant's taken up all the elements, you know all the elements are in the soil. But if you
Yeah,
test your
absolutely.
soil, you know, if you
Mm.
test your soil and you can't see like calcium, for instance, or copper, it still could be there. It's just the test isn't good enough to be able to determine whether it's there or not. And the other thing to know is if you are deficient, how do you rectify that? You know, so what can, and we will go on to this in a minute, is you can add things that will bring that back into the soil. And then you just need to have your soil at the ideal level. So that particular nutrient that you've added is still then available to the soil. Okay.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it totally makes sense. Absolutely, because what you're saying, I can't stress how important it is. It's so important. And just going back to the industrial agriculture, I mean, we don't know how bad we know it's bad, but we don't know how bad the damage is done to the soil, because they're not going to go and do these tests into the soil because they don't actually care about the soil, and that's the issue. We're not, they're not going to know. Um, you know, but for our own soil, if we're doing these, if we're growing food ourselves, it's so important for an individual. You know, an individual may be growing food for like 10 years, but don't know this information. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, there might be, you know, that everybody has their own way how to grow food. Okay. But that individual that has been growing for 10 years, growing food for 10 years, does not know if there's enough nutrients going into the fruit and veg. Okay. They don't know, even though they may look healthy, and you know, obviously we can find out if the plants are a good indicator if they you know if they're healthy or not. But there's still so much nutrients probably lacking in these fruit and veg, because they haven't taken the time out to look into the soil and how to do this testing, testing the soil and all these different tests that they can do. What we want to do is we want to bring it to people's attention and awareness, you know, that we can do this now, you know. And of course, 100 years ago, the soil was so much better. But now we have the ability to know how to do these tests and just experiment with it. It's not to put pressure on anybody, you know, because it is a complicated. This can be as complicated as you want it to be. It's a very in-depth conversation that we will have about the soil food web, and the complexity of it, I don't think we'll ever fully understand or understand. But there is a lot now that we can understand, and there's a lot now that we can do, and we should be having fun with this. And that we're going to give some ideas now on how we can make these amendments to the soil. So we'll go into mineral amendments, John. We can do volcanic rock dust. They're full of micronutrients. You've got liquid seaweed full of micronutrients. Ocean water, you're not going to get much better than that. And you know, you like Hebrides seaweed, John, and we've done homemade preps, Korean natural farming, water soluble calcium, which is eggshells and vinegar. With the vinegar strips the calcium from the eggshells, then you have like liquid calcium. We've done these little things, John. So, but let's get into the mineral amendments. There's so much we can do and to play with this. So, let's get into the mineral amendments.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you mentioned one. Well, so Hebridean seaweed,
yeah,
and volcanic rock dust. So these are shop bought. you can't make them yourself. Well, you can go and get seaweed. You can certainly do that. But I think the interesting thing about these is they contain a lot of micronutrients.
Yes, yes.
So they will contain things like boron and zinc and manganese. They also contain things like iron. And you've got to think the Hebridean seaweed is just absorbing all the minerals from the sea.
Yeah.
But they've done the process of storing those in their bodies. So they're a lot easier to release. The issue, I just want to compare this to ocean minerals, is ocean minerals are cool to use, but you've got to be really careful because obviously ocean water is salt water.
Yes, yes.
So you don't want this salt binding other things up. Yeah, so that's
Very
just
true, yeah.
important to consider.
Yeah, very true.
You can use seaweed to act as a fungal food as well. So the applications for them are quite amazing. A lot of people would have heard of things like maxi crop. I don't personally trust these big names. I'd rather get it from a sustainable, regenerative supplier, and supporting local businesses. So this is why I kind of go for the Hebridean seaweed, because the company I buy it from, they seem pretty, careful and mindful about how they harvest and process the seaweed. So,
yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I have used maxi crop before, and the plants seem to. I tell you what, they make such a difference. The plants do seem to love it. But you are correct in saying that, and I will next season will start to be using Hebridean seaweed because it is much better to use. I don't fully trust these bigger corporations, so I will be. We've used it together when we were making our soil, but I'm going to personally use Hebridean seaweed as well, and we'll leave all relevant links for people to purchase these things. And yeah, I just wanted to add that bit in there that I'll be using Hebridean seaweed because it is truly, it's just such good stuff to use.
Yeah, it's amazing, and there's so many applications for it. You can use it when you're making compost. You can use it when you're making compost tea. You can use it as a foliar spray, as a soil soak. There's probably loads more applications that haven't.
Yeah.
So but you need to also be careful not to overuse it, right? Because you don't want to overload these plants with these certain nutrients, because that can also cause toxicity. So, everything that we do when we're remediating or regenerating or building soil is about balance.
About balance and doing it slowly.
And there's I've been, me, George, I look at a lot of the science side of things, and I look at papers and etc. I was looking at DNA the other day. I kind of go on these little kind of offshoots where I just start to get into something, but I have to remind myself that although the testing is really important, we can't allow ourselves just to be governed by the testing. It is as much about connection. And look, you've been out doing plant medicine and stuff, and it's as much about the connection to the plants as it is, because all plants can be medicine. I mean, food was the original medicine.
It was, right? Yes.
So we can seriously, actually, when we eat good quality food with the right balanced nutrients, that's only going to happen if the plants have it and the soil has it.
Yes.
And if we have it, we have a clearer mind, our spirit is less impeded, our emotions are more balanced, our physical health is more vibrant, and we are able to be more open. And this is like, you know, stuff that's starting to come out now, is we are electrical beings, right? So when we're eating the right food and we're getting the right nutrients, just like in the soil, you know, the process of photosynthesis, when photosynthetic process is happening, we're going from electrical energy of the sun to biological energy within the plant to chemical energy within the soil and biological energy to electrical energy, and then we eat the plant, the biology of the plant, along with the nutrients, and that is then converted back into electrical energy, which runs our bodies. We are run by electricity.
Yes.
The biology and the chemistry is still part of it, but they're like the components that drive the charge, just like the biology and the chemistry drive the charge in the soil. So we can make soil, talking of rock dust, we can make the soil paramagnetic by adding rock dust. Rock dust, or volcanic rock dust, has a paramagnetic charge to it. Yeah. So I'm talking about another process that involves nutrients and minerals that act as a carrier to drive these electrical charges. And talking of electrical charge, you know, it's really important to consider that, again, relating to the sun and the Birkeland currents that connect stars, this is how the universe works. We don't live in a universe that is governed by gravity mainly. It's governed by electrical connection. Yeah,
I totally agree. Yes, it's just electricity is everything.
Gravity still exists, but it's definitely not the biggest energy. The electric universe, the theory of the electric universe, hasn't got any holes in it like the Newtonian view of the universe. Yeah, when they're trying to explain what they can't see in the universe, they call it dark matter. It's 98% or 95%, right? That's you can't like, you know, we've been looking for this for 30 years and still not been able to detect it. It means that the theory is incorrect. And the reason I'm saying this is because we have the same thinking with chemical agriculture. We've been doing this for 100 years, but we're trying to do it our way. We're trying to come from this very masculine energy where we know what's right. We come from our ego and not our soul, you know? So this is why I'm talking about not coming from this too much of a scientific perspective, because we need to have this connection as well. The science is there to back us up, but really the connection with the plants. And then I think people who have been around plants for a long time can feel if a plant needs something. You know, there was Masanobu Fukuoka, who was he wrote a really cool book called The One Straw Revolution. He was a very famous farmer in the 60s and 70s in Japan. And he was renowned for kind of going into a forest, and there was a couple of people like this. And he just knew if the forest was ill. Didn't look ill, but he could feel it. These tiny little things that nobody else can sense, you know, and that came from a life of just being with plants. So I'm just saying this just to make people aware that observation is just as important as action. You know, reflection and contemplation all have their place. And we shouldn't do anything too hasty. We should just be patient and take our time. So yeah, rock dust has an amazing capability. You can add it to compost, you can add it to compost tea, you can add it straight to the soil. Again, you don't need to put in a massive amount. The recommended amount for rock dust is like a handful per square meter. But you only have to apply that once every couple of years, you know. But if your soil is seriously lacking in minerals, yes, add the rock dust, you know. Um, and so they're the two main things that you can buy that are really good as a mineral amendment. And then obviously you have your ocean minerals, which you can go and get. If you do go and get this, you need to be really aware of where you're getting your water from, because it might have contaminants in it. It might have heavy metals, you know. So, you know, if you get it from near a shipping lane, right, you know,
Yeah,
there's a good chance that there could be some kind of toxicity in
of
the soil,
course.
in the
Yeah,
water. So you can actually get the water tested as well. And these are all things to consider. You don't have to do them. You can do what you want. But this is just everything I'm learning. And yeah, it's just to be aware of these possibilities. So about a year and a half ago, I started making my own amendments, and you mentioned WCA, or water soluble calcium. This is a brilliant amendment that you can easily make from eggshells and vinegar. It's a really easy process, and this is part of what is called Korean natural farming, or natural farming, which coincidentally actually came from Japan. And this guy called Master Cho learned with these three Japanese alchemists who were taking what nature produced and using particular processes through fermentation, through osmosis, and through alcohol extraction. Japan is quite famous for these types of things, right? We have the fermented food and all that kind of stuff. And they were using these to extract the chemical component of those foods. So eggshells are high in calcium. Fruits are high in particular nutrients like potassium or boron. You know, there's lots of different kind of combinations. So our kind of role is to kind of understand like what we can use. So these guys would study food, and they would experiment with them to then determine what was in there. You know, so I've mentioned WCA. Another one is like potassium. So you can get potassium from bananas. Yeah, so everyone knows bananas are high in potassium.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
You can use, you get the bananas, you chop it up, you put it in with sugar, and what happens is that sugar basically takes out the liquid from that banana and takes out the potassium from the banana. You then drain it off. You can chuck away or chuck the other stuff in your compost or whatever, but the liquid you keep, and that's liquid potassium. And potassium is really important for when plants are flowering and fruiting. So you would add that when they start to flower. Yeah, that's gonna drive more potassium into the plant itself. And one thing I found out the other day when I was listening to this woman called Harriet Meller was that when you grow tomatoes, yeah, what actually helps the tomato go red is potassium. Yeah. Now, do you know slugs will actually go for tomatoes which have something called green shoulder? So where the stem of the plant attaches to the tomato itself, you've probably seen this, George, where some of the tomatoes are green around that bit, the other
Yeah,
part red.
yeah.
Slugs will be attracted to that.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
It's mad. It's mad.
yeah.
The things I was learning about slugs the other day, like we'll have to do this on another podcast, but I was just like, wow, that makes so much sense. That's why, because they don't go for the ones that have just gone red. They're going for the ones that haven't had enough potassium delivered into the fruit.
It's awesome to know this because slugs keep showing up in our allotment, and they're there to, or anywhere we're growing food, because they are there teaching us something.
Mm. And who thought you'd be able to get taught by a slug?
Exactly.
Right. But and this woman, Harriet Mello, she's brilliant. This is all done through observation. So she
Mm.
literally, she's like this, very, very beautiful kind of capability to be able to observe what's going on with the plants and why pests are eating the plants and why plants look ill. So you don't always need testing to see these things. This is an example. You can be an observer. Okay, you might need things to clarify what your theory is, but quite often in science, someone has a theory and they use scientific experiments to prove whether that theory is right. You know what I mean? So, but it doesn't mean the theory is not right. It just means that a theory comes from intuition usually. Maybe it's for that reason, and you have this intuition in your gut. We were talking about our gut and how quite a lot of the time, as long as that feeling's not blocked, it's like our gut feeling is right a lot of the time. And the more we trust that, the more we're going to actually be accurate in our understanding. And that comes through observation. So, yeah, so that's potassium. And then you have boron. And this is an interesting one. So this is what I've been playing around with. I want to do more Korean natural farming preps next year. But boron, I made boron because I had a plum tree. Plums are high in boron. I know that tree hasn't been sprayed for a long time, so my soil's pretty good. So that you do it through the same process as bananas. You get the plums. Sorry, you cut out the stones. You stick it in some with sugar, brown sugar, and you wait for like 7 days, and then you wait until you can see the liquid coming out of the sugar and the plums with this reaction of osmosis, and then you will then do the same thing, extract it, and you use that as a spray. Obviously, you need to water these down. Now, I use boron along with water-soluble calcium to protect my plants, my tomato plants, from blight. And the reason you do this is because I think we mentioned this before. Blight is a fungal pathogen, an airborne fungal pathogen, which gets through the cell wall of the plant. So that can be the leaf or the stem. And it does that because that part of it's weak. And the reason that's weak is if you have lack of silicon, lack of boron, or lack of calcium. We know calcium improves the strength of our bones. Yeah, it's similar to plants. Their cell walls are improved by calcium. So yeah, that's just a few kind of examples of what's going on with nutrients and how we can use them.
Yeah, I think. We've done a few experiments a couple of years ago on Korean natural farming, and it's just a great way to learn the process of these things, because you're right as well, because in the olden days they didn't have the technology that we have today. So they would have done it the natural way. They would have done it through observation. They would have done it through experiencing all these, what works and what didn't work. Because the way that we've been growing food for years now, we've had it easy in that way. And we had a lot of things done for us, and we miss out on the actual experience of growing food and the way that it should be done actually properly. So, it's not just, it's very important to understand growing food within all aspects of ourselves, for the health, for emotionally, physically, spiritually, but also mentally, understanding the process of everything that we've talked about today. It's understanding the process mentally, so we can have an even more connection with nature, even more connection with the food, with the soil, and just taking back the whole control of how it is supposed to be done, and for the love of doing it. So I think we've covered a lot today, John. So it's a good time to stop the podcast. We're going to pick up, and the next time we do the podcast, we'll go into a bit more of the biological amendments. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah, and then maybe we can tackle CEC and Radox.
Yes, it gets more technical, but it is so important to even understand the basics of that. Yeah,
definitely. And I think what I'm learning at the moment, George, is I keep hearing a lot of these same messages, man. It's quite amazing. And once we realize that we don't really know much, it's very easy, when I've been learning this, I'm like, God, I'm learning so much. And yet I keep proving to myself time and time again through study that maybe in 10 years, the information that I know now will have changed. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's only part of the picture.
Yes.
So totally. It's really important to realize that as soon as we realize that we don't know, and I'm talking more of a spiritual sense than like knowledge, I'm talking about wisdom, this is what's so important about connection and observation and reflection and contemplation, is that things are changing all the time. We were talking about the electromagnetic field. The electromagnetic field changing on our planet will no doubt influence all life on this planet. And that includes plants and the way they adapt and the way they evolve and the way they interact with everything. So, it's just important to remember that, this isn't about being scared. This is about being prepared. I'm sure you'll back me up, George. These podcasts are as much about delivering hope and empowerment as they are about knowledge. And we've got to just be really aware of that we are these beautiful, amazing creations, whatever's created us. And if you're listening to this, it means that you can resonate with that. And I think when we open ourselves, open our hearts, open our minds, we can vibrate at a higher frequency. And that means that more of the things that we desire deep in our soul are going to come to us. But we have to shed these veils that we've built up around us to be able to break free and become a better version of ourselves.
I think the most important thing is, I agree with what you're saying. I think the most important thing is to keep learning, and the less we know, the more we will continue to learn. And that's the key thing, because once we say we know it now, we've lost the learning. We stop learning, and we don't ever want to stop learning. It's all about expanding our human consciousness. It's about understanding ourselves. It's about understanding how nature really works, how the laws that govern us work. And it's about being in harmony with nature and in harmony with ourselves, and bringing back the knowledge that our ancestors had. And we hope that, we're bringing everything, many different aspects to it. And I'm sure it will be helping many people. And we'll continue to do these podcasts, because you're learning a different side of things. I'm learning a different side of things. We're all learning different sides to everything, and we're bringing it together. And it's all about going back to one. It's all about the oneness. And that's the key thing. To really understand. And I think the next podcast, John, we're gonna do the fasting one. I think you we're gonna flip this, and and John's gonna. I've already done a podcast on fasting, but I will be sharing more up to date things with regards to it, because it goes hand in hand with growing food. It is so important to remember that the Hunza tribe, when they were growing food, they were also meditating, they were also fasting, and they never got diseases. So it goes hand in hand. So we do that next time. Funny enough, I am planning on starting a fast this weekend. So I'll be in the middle of the fast by the time you interview me, John, on this. So
cool.
Yeah. So, anything you want to add before we close?
No, just like we're entering a period. We're entering a time now. It's the season of everything's closing down in the northern hemisphere. So, I think this is for us. It doesn't mean we don't stop. It means that we start to slow down inside, and we start to reflect and contemplate about what changes we want to make next year. And what things we want to let go of. That's really, really important, to let go of old habits that don't serve us anymore. So, I wish everyone to be well and healthy, and, live abundantly, no matter what you've got, and be grateful,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a nice way to end the podcast. I say the same thing. As it's all about joy. It's all about happiness. It's all about being just happy in this world, even though that there's a lot going on. We hope that we've given you a lot of tools on these podcasts. I've got my own podcast, Unveiling the Truth, if anybody wants to listen to those. We've got our Conversations for Our Time. John, you've got your own podcast. If you just want to share, just quickly share a bit of that.
Yeah, cool. So on YouTube, I've got Sow, Grow, Regenerative, and on my Rumble, it's Sow, Grow, Regenerate. So either of those, I want to encourage people to kind of go over to Rumble, because I'm trying to vacate YouTube. I think it's a smart move, because not even because anything's censored, just because I don't want to support a platform that is decensoring and shadow banning and all these kind of things, just because people are trying to say their truth. So
yeah, I agree with that, John. I'm going to leave all relevant links underneath the podcast, so people can just click on the relevant links and just take from it whatever they please. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks, John, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.
Thanks, George. Take it easy. Bye.
Pond 5.